The morning sky over Aquaria Prime had turned the color of blood. Ambassador Zara Veltan pressed her webbed hand against the cool glass of the observation deck and watched as her homeworld burned below. The crystal cities that had taken her people thousands of years to build were nothing but glowing craters now. The beautiful coral gardens where her children had played were melting into the ocean under the heat of alien weapons. She could hear the screaming through the communication channels. Her people were dying, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The Vorac had come without warning, just like they always did. One day, the outer monitoring stations had reported strange readings at the edge of the system. The next day, those stations went silent. By the third day, massive bioships that looked like twisted combinations of metal and flesh were dropping from the sky like dark rain. Zara had seen the recordings from other worlds that had fallen to the swarm. She knew what was happening down there. The Vorac did not just kill their enemies, they consumed them. They turned living beings into food, and they used that food to grow more bioships, more weapons, more soldiers. Every person who died down there would make the swarm stronger. "Ambassador," came a voice behind her. She turned to see Captain Terran standing in the doorway. His blue-green skin had gone pale, and his gill slits were fluttering rapidly with stress. "The defense fleet is gone. Admiral Korath's ship was the last one. We watched it get pulled into one of their bioships 10 minutes ago." Zara closed her eyes. Admiral Korath had been her friend since they were children swimming in the same tide pools. Now he was gone, along with 30,000 other brave souls who had tried to protect their world. "How long do we have?" she asked. "Maybe 6 hours before they reach the orbital stations. Maybe 12 before they finish with the planet." Theron's voice was steady, but she could hear the fear underneath. "The evacuation ships got away with about 2 million people. That's all we could save. 2 million out of 4 billion. Zara felt sick. Her people had lived in peace for over 2,000 years. They had never hurt anyone. They shared their technology freely with other species and asked for nothing in return. They had thought their kindness would protect them. They had been wrong. "What about the Galactic Council?" Zara asked, though she already knew the answer. "They're holding an emergency session. They'll debate for weeks about whether to send help. Even if they decide to act, it will be too late." Theron walked over to stand beside her at the window. "I'm sorry, Ambassador. There's nothing more we can do." But Zara was not ready to give up. She had spent 20 years representing her people to the galaxy. She had made friends with dozens of species. Surely someone out there would help them. "Get me access to the long-range communication array," she said. "Ambassador, I told you. The Council, not the Council. Everyone else." Zara turned away from the window and walked toward the communication center. "I'm going to send a message to every species in the galaxy. Someone has to help us." The communication center was in chaos. Technicians were trying to coordinate the evacuation while maintaining contact with the few remaining military units. Emergency alarms blared constantly, and the lights flickered as the station's power systems struggled under the load. Zara sat down at the main communication console and began typing. Her message was simple and direct. She did not have time for diplomatic language or formal protocols. "This is Ambassador Zara Veltan of the Kepler Republic, broadcasting on all frequencies," she began. "Our worlds are under attack by the Vorac swarm. We are not warriors. We have no weapons that can stop them. Our defense fleets are destroyed. Our planets are burning. In 12 hours, 4 billion innocent people will be dead unless someone helps us." She paused, looking out at the stars. Through the communication center's viewport, somewhere out there, beyond the light of distant suns, were hundreds of civilizations. Most of them had armies. Most of them had weapons far more powerful than anything the peaceful Kepler Republic had ever built. "We have never asked for help before," she continued. "We have always solved our own problems, but this is beyond us. The Vorac are too strong, and we are too few. If you can hear this message, if you have any ships that can fight, please help us. We don't have anything to offer in return except our gratitude and the promise that we will remember your kindness forever." She took a deep breath and added the final words. "This is probably the last message anyone will receive from Aquaria. Prime, we are going to die here, but maybe our deaths will mean something if they warn the rest of the galaxy about what's coming. The Vorac won't stop with us. They never stop. Today it's the Kepler Republic. Tomorrow it could be your homeworld. Please, someone, anyone, help us." Zara sent the message out on every frequency the station could access. It would reach the nearby systems in minutes, and the distant ones in hours. She programmed the system to repeat the message every 10 minutes until the station was destroyed. Then, she sat back and waited. The first responses came quickly. The Centauri Federation sent their regrets, but explained that their fleet was too far away to help in time. The hegemony of worlds offered to accept refugees but had no military forces to spare. The Crystalline Collective sent a formal protest about the Vorac attacks and promised to bring the matter up at the next council session. More messages came in as the hours passed. Expressions of sympathy, offers of humanitarian aid for the survivors, promises to remember the Kepler Republic's sacrifice, but no one was coming to help them fight. Captain Terran brought her regular updates. The Vorac bioships had finished consuming the planet's surface and were moving toward the orbital stations. The massive creatures were feeding on everything they could find: metal, organic matter, even the electromagnetic fields from the power generators. "We should evacuate the station," Terran said during one of his visits. "There's a transport ship waiting. We could be at the jump point in 30 minutes. "No," Zara replied without looking away from her console. "I'm staying here until the end. Maybe someone will still answer our call." But as the hours passed, Zara began to lose hope. The galaxy was full of species that claimed to value peace and justice, but when those values were tested, they all found excuses to look the other way. The Kepler Republic would die alone, just like so many other peaceful civilizations before them. At 11 hours and 47 minutes after her first broadcast, something strange happened. A new signal appeared on the communication array's sensors. It was coming from the outer edge of the system, where no ships should have been able to approach without being detected by the Vorac. Zara leaned forward and studied the readings. The signal was unlike anything she had ever seen. It was not using any of the standard galactic communication protocols. The frequency patterns were completely alien, and the signal strength was much weaker than anything a major military force would use. She almost ignored it. It was probably just interference from the Vorac bioships or debris from the destroyed defense fleet. But something made her adjust the communication array to focus on the strange signal. What she heard changed everything. The voice that came through the speakers was unlike any species in the galactic databases. It was smooth and musical, but there was something dangerous underneath it. Something that reminded Zara of the deep ocean predators that lived in the darkest trenches of her homeworld. "Kepler Republic, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force," the voice said. "We received your distress call. We're sorry we're late to the party. We were on the other side of the galaxy when your message reached us, and it took him some time to get here." Zara stared at the communication console in shock. She had never heard of the Terran Defense Force. There was no species called Terrans in any of the galactic databases, but someone was out there, and they were claiming to have come in response to her message. "Unknown vessel, this is Ambassador Zara Veltan," she replied. "I don't know who you are, but you need to leave this system immediately. The Vorac swarm is here. They've destroyed our entire defense fleet. Your ship will be consumed if you stay." There was a pause. Then the alien voice came back. This time, Zara could hear something that sounded like laughter in the background. "Ambassador, we appreciate the warning, but we didn't come all this way just to turn around and leave. We humans have a saying: the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. We're not the kind of people who do nothing when someone asks for help. Humans. Zara had never heard of them, but the name sent a strange chill down her spine. There was something about the way the Admiral said it that suggested these humans were not like the other species. She knew. Admiral Chen, I don't know what kind of force you have with you, but the Vorac have over 200 bioships in this system. Each one is the size of a city and armed with weapons that can crack planets. You can't fight them all. Ambassador, you're probably right. We can't fight them all. The human's voice was calm, almost cheerful. But that's never stopped us before. We humans have another saying: it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. And right now we're feeling pretty scrappy. Before Zara could respond, her sensors detected new contacts appearing throughout the system. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace all around the Vorac positions. They were smaller than the bioships, but there were dozens of them, and they were moving in patterns that made no sense, according to any military doctrine Zara knew. All Terran vessels. This is Admiral Chen. The human voice came over the open channel. Operation Helping Hand is now in effect. Remember, people, we're here to save lives and kick ass. Let's show these bugs what happens when they mess with innocent folks. The response that came back over the channel was unlike anything Zara had ever heard in her life. Dozens of human voices, all talking at once, shouting things like "Roger that, Admiral," and "Let's light them up," and "Time to take out the trash." There was music playing in the background, loud, aggressive music that sounded like it was designed for war. Zara watched her sensors in amazement as the human ships engaged the Vorac bioships. The humans fought like nothing she had ever seen. They used tactics that seemed to defy logic, ramming their ships into the bioships at incredible speeds, then somehow escaping before the collision. They fired weapons that seemed to tear holes in space itself. They moved in patterns that looked like chaos, but somehow always put them exactly where they needed to be. And they never stopped talking. The communication channels were full of human voices, shouting encouragement to each other, making jokes, even singing songs while they fought. It was as if they were enjoying themselves. But the most incredible thing was that they were winning. For the first time in 3 days, Zara felt something she had thought was lost forever. She felt hope. These strange humans had come from across the galaxy to help people they had never met, and they were actually succeeding where the entire Kepler Defense Force had failed. As she watched the battle unfold on her sensors, Zara realized that her message had been answered after all. Help had come to the Kepler Republic, and that help came from the most unexpected source imaginable, a species that the galaxy had never heard of, fighting with weapons and tactics that no one understood, driven by principles that most civilizations had forgotten. The humans had come to save them all. The Vorac Queen Mind had consumed over 1,000 worlds in her long existence. She had devoured civilizations that spanned entire star systems and turned their populations into biomass for her ever-growing swarm. She had faced the combined fleets of 3 galactic powers and emerged victorious. Nothing in the known galaxy could challenge her supremacy. So when her scout minds reported the arrival of unknown vessels in the Kepler system, she was merely curious rather than concerned. These new ships were small, barely larger than the escort vessels that usually fled at the first sight of her bioships. Their design was strange, angular and metallic, rather than the flowing organic shapes that most advanced species preferred. They broadcast no identification signals that matched any entry in her vast databases of consumed civilizations. The Queen Mind directed her attention to the largest concentration of bioships near the 3rd planet. General Form Scarex, one of her most successful tactical minds, was overseeing the final harvest of the world's remaining population centers. The planet had been surprisingly easy to consume. Its inhabitants were peaceful creatures who had put up little resistance beyond a few pathetic defense ships. Now something new had arrived to interrupt the feeding. General form, the Queen Mind spoke directly into Scarex's consciousness. Identify these new vessels. Scarex was currently merged with his command bioship, a massive creature that resembled a cross between a whale and a warship. His personal consciousness was spread throughout the ship's neural networks, allowing him to control its weapons and movement as if they were extensions of his own body. Unknown, Queen Mind, Scarex replied. Their technology signature does not match any known species. They are broadcasting on multiple frequencies, but the language patterns are unfamiliar. Are they a threat? Scarex examined the sensor readings from his scout mines. The newcomer ships were fast and maneuverable, but they were vastly outnumbered. His bioships in this system alone outnumbered them 4-1, and each bioship was several times larger than the largest enemy vessel. Minimal threat, Queen Mind. Their fleet composition suggests they are raiders or explorers rather than a serious military force. I estimate complete consumption within 6 standard time units. Proceed with caution, the Queen Mind commanded. Unknown species sometimes possess unexpected capabilities. Test their defenses before committing to full assault. Scarex acknowledged the order and began repositioning his bioships into a standard intimidation formation. This had proven effective against most species. The sight of 200 massive bioships moving in perfect coordination was usually enough to cause enemy forces to surrender or flee without a fight. As his ships moved into position, Scarex tried to establish communication with the newcomers. This was standard procedure. The Vorac always offered their enemies a chance to surrender before consuming them. It was more efficient than fighting, and it often provided valuable intelligence about the target species' capabilities and weaknesses. The response he received was unlike anything in his vast military experience. Instead of the expected formal communication protocols, the newcomers responded with what sounded like organized chaos. Multiple voices spoke at once over the same channel, creating a cacophony of sounds that seemed to follow no logical pattern. Underneath the voices was a rhythmic noise that pulsed with aggressive energy, what the newcomers apparently called music. Scarex's translator system struggled to process the alien language. The words that came through were confusing and often contradictory. Terms like locked and loaded, time to rock and roll, and let's dance made no sense in a military context. One voice, clearer and more authoritative than the others, finally established proper communication. Vorac forces, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. You are engaged in unprovoked attacks against civilian populations. Withdraw immediately, or we will be forced to take defensive action. Scarex was amused. The newcomers, apparently called Terrans or humans, were threatening him. A force of 50 small ships was threatening the most successful military commander in the swarm's history. Unknown species, Scarex replied, using his most intimidating psychic projection to accompany his words. You have entered a system under Vorac control. Your ships will be consumed. Your crews will become biomass for the swarm. Surrender now, and your absorption will be swift and painless. The response was immediate and completely unexpected. Laughter. Not. The nervous laughter of a frightened enemy, but genuine, hearty amusement. Multiple human voices joined in, creating a chorus of laughter that filled the communication channels. Scarex was so surprised that he momentarily lost his connection to his bioship's weapons systems. Did this bug just threaten to eat us? One of the human voices asked. I think he did, another replied. That's adorable. Hey, Admiral, can we keep one as a pet? Admiral Chen's voice cut through the chatter. Negative, Captain Torres. No pets on this mission. We're here to help the locals, not start a collection. Scarex tried again, this time adding a powerful psychic assault to his communication. This technique had driven entire enemy crews insane with terror. He projected images of previous conquests, showing the humans exactly what fate awaited them. The laughter stopped, and for a moment Scarex thought his attack had worked. Then the human voices returned. But now they sounded different. Where before they had been merely amused, now they sounded actively hostile. "Well, that was rude," Admiral Chen said. "Did everyone else see what I just saw?" "Roger that, Admiral," came a chorus of responses. "These things are definitely the bad guys. In that case, all units are cleared to engage. Show them what we think of bullies who pick on innocent people." What happened next defied everything Scarex knew about space combat. The human ships didn't. Retreat to a safe distance and begin a conventional bombardment. They didn't try to use superior technology to overwhelm his forces. Instead, they accelerated directly toward his bioships at speeds that should have been impossible for vessels of their size. Scarex commanded his scout mines to open fire, expecting to vaporize the approaching ships before they could get within effective weapons range. But the humans seemed to anticipate every shot. They twisted and spun through space in patterns that looked random, but somehow always kept them just ahead of his weapons. And they kept talking. "Incoming fire, bearing 27 Mark IV, one voice reported with clinical precision. "I see it," another replied. "Juking left. Someone want to return the favor?" "On it. Fox 3, multiple targets." Scarex watched in amazement as the human ships launched what appeared to be small projectile weapons. The projectiles moved much slower than energy weapons and should have been easy to intercept or avoid. But when they struck his bioships, the damage was far more severe than their size should have allowed. "What are those weapons?" he demanded of his tactical minds. Unknown general form. The projectiles appear to be some form of guided explosive, but their warheads contain unknown compounds that are highly destructive to our bio-armor. Before Scarex could process this information fully, the first human ship reached one of his scout mines. Instead of firing at maximum range like any sensible warrior, the human ship flew directly at the bioship's hull and attached itself to the surface. "Boarding party away," the human pilot reported cheerfully. "See you on the other side, people." The pilot then activated some kind of escape system that teleported him away from his ship just as it exploded. The explosion tore a massive hole in the bioship's hull, causing it to lose structural integrity and begin drifting helplessly. This was impossible. No species fought like this. No rational commander would sacrifice expensive ships and trained pilots for such minimal tactical gains. But somehow, the humans were making it work. More human ships reached his formation and repeated the same insane tactic. They would ram into his bioships, cause massive damage, and somehow escape at the last second. It was as if they considered their own ships to be disposable ammunition rather than valuable military assets. "General Form," one of his sub-commanders, reported with barely concealed panic, "The humans are boarding Bioship 17. They're fighting the internal defense systems with handheld weapons." "That's impossible," Scarex replied. "Bioship 17 contains over 3,000 warrior forms. No boarding party could survive more than a few minutes." "General Form, they're not just surviving, they're winning. The humans appear to be using some kind of powered armor that makes them incredibly strong and fast, and they're enjoying themselves. They keep making noise while they fight." Scarex switched his attention to Bioship 17's internal sensors. What he saw there shook his confidence even more than the space battle. A dozen humans in metallic armor were carving their way through his warrior forms like a hot blade through ice. They moved with coordination and precision. But there was something wild about their fighting style, something that suggested they were having fun. One of the humans was actually singing while he fought, his voice carrying over the communication system as he systematically destroyed warrior form after warrior form with weapons that seemed primitive but were devastatingly effective. "This is Captain Marcus Torres of the 1st Marine Assault Battalion," the singing human reported between explosive detonations. I'm currently redecorating the interior of this ugly ship, and I have to say, the previous owners had terrible taste in furniture. How's the housekeeping going, Captain? Admiral Chen's voice came back. Almost done with the spring cleaning, Admiral. Should have this place nice and tidy in about 10 minutes. The locals weren't very welcoming, but we're working through our differences. Scarex realized with growing alarm that he was losing. Somehow, impossibly, these unknown humans with their strange tactics and inexplicable attitude were defeating forces that had conquered half the galaxy. He tried to contact the Queen Mind for guidance, but she was busy coordinating attacks in other systems. He was on his own, facing an enemy unlike anything the Vorac had ever encountered. "All bioships, full assault formation," he commanded. "Converge on the human fleet and destroy them." But as his massive ships moved to surround the humans, Scarex noticed something that filled him with a new kind of dread. The humans weren't trying to escape. Instead, they were regrouping for another attack. And their communication chatter suggested they were actually excited about being outnumbered. "All right, people," Admiral Chen announced. "Looks like they want to dance. Form up on me. Let's show these bugs how humans party." The music on their communication channels got louder, and Scarex realized that he was facing something the Vorac had never encountered before, a species that seemed to get stronger and more dangerous the worse their situation became. For the first time in his long military career, General Form Scarex began to experience something that was completely alien to the Vorac collective consciousness. He began to feel afraid. Ambassador Zara Veltan watched the battle unfold on her sensors with a mixture of amazement and terror. The humans fought like nothing she had ever seen in her 20 years of diplomatic service. Their tactics seemed to ignore every rule of space combat that had been developed over thousands of years of galactic warfare, where rational commanders would maintain safe distances and rely on long-range weapons. The humans flew their ships directly into the heart of the Vorac formation. Where sensible military doctrine called for preservation of forces and careful resource management, the humans seemed to treat their own ships as expendable weapons, but somehow, impossibly, it was working. "Captain Terran," she called to her aide, who was standing nearby with his gill slits fluttering in stress. "Are you seeing this?" "I'm seeing it, Ambassador, but I don't understand it. According to our tactical computers, the humans should have been destroyed 15 minutes ago. Their fleet doesn't have enough firepower to damage even one Vorac bioship, let alone 20. Yet as they watched, another massive bioship began drifting helplessly, its bioluminescent markings flickering and dying as whatever the humans had done to it took effect. The ship was easily 10 times larger than the human vessel that had attacked it, but it was clearly disabled. "Ma'am," came a voice from the communication station. "I'm picking up internal transmissions from that bioship. The humans are inside it and they're fighting the crew hand-to-hand." Zara moved to the communication console and listened to the intercepted transmissions. What she heard made her question whether the translation software was working properly. "Yo, Torres, catch!" The voice was speaking in the human language, but the translation system was providing subtitles. "Got a big ugly one coming your way." "Thanks, Martinez. Time to introduce this bug to Mr. Boom Boom." There was a sound like an explosion, followed by what could only be described as cheering. "Hey, Lieutenant Kim, you seeing the size of these things? They're like oversized lobsters with anger management issues." "Yeah, but they taste terrible. Already tried. Definitely going to need some hot sauce if we're having these for dinner." Zara stared at the console in shock. The humans were not only fighting the Vorac in close combat, something no sane species would attempt, but they were joking about it. They seemed to be treating a life-or-death battle like some kind of recreational activity. "Ambassador," Captain Terran said quietly, "what kind of species jokes while fighting the most dangerous predators in the galaxy?" Before Zara could answer, a new voice joined the human communication chatter. This one sounded different from the others, calmer, more analytical, but with an undertone of excitement that was somehow more frightening than the others' obvious enthusiasm. "This is Dr. Elena Vasquez, Xenobiology Team. I'm currently examining Vorac neural tissue, and I have some interesting findings to report." "Go ahead, Doc," came Admiral Chen's voice. "What have you learned?" "These creatures are fascinating. Their nervous system is completely integrated with their technology. Each bioship is essentially a single organism with thousands of smaller organisms serving as organs and limbs. But here's the interesting part. They're vulnerable to sensory overload. Come again, Doctor. Their hive mind consciousness requires constant communication between all parts of the organism. If we can disrupt that communication, we can disable entire ships. I'm uploading some frequency patterns to the fleet now. Try broadcasting these on maximum power." Zara watched her sensors as the human ships began transmitting something on multiple frequencies. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then, one by one, the Vorac bioships began to slow their movements and their weapons fire became erratic. "Outstanding work, Doc." Admiral Chen's voice was full of approval. "What are we broadcasting at them?" "Oh, just some classical music from Earth. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, to be specific. Apparently, the Vorac nervous system can't process complex harmonic structures. It's causing feedback loops in their collective consciousness." Zara had to sit down. The humans were defeating the most feared military force in the galaxy by playing music at them. She began to understand why no one in the galactic databases had heard of these Terrans before. They were so far outside normal parameters that most species would have dismissed them as a statistical impossibility. The battle continued, but now it was clearly turning in favor of the humans. Their ships moved through the Vorac formation, like predators hunting prey, using tactics that should have been suicide, but somehow kept working. They broadcast their music, disabled bioships with ram attacks, and sent boarding parties to fight creatures that most species could only defeat with heavy weapons. And they never stopped talking. "Hey, Chen, you seeing this? I just convinced one of these bugs to surrender by showing it pictures of Earth food. Apparently, they've never encountered anything as terrifying as a chili pepper." "That's Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka," another voice explained helpfully. "She's our cultural warfare specialist. Give her 5 minutes and she can traumatize an entire alien species just by explaining human cuisine." "Roger that." "Lieutenant, see if you can get them to surrender the rest of the ship. We've got civilians to rescue, and I'd rather not have to fight through every corridor." Zara realized that the humans were not just attacking the Vorac. They were actively trying to rescue the Kepler Republic citizens who had been captured during the initial invasion. This was beyond military tactics. This was a rescue mission being conducted in the middle of a space battle. "Captain Terran," she said, "patch me into the human communication network. I need to coordinate with them." "Ambassador, are you sure?" "That's wise. We don't know anything about these humans. They could be just as dangerous as the Vorac." "Captain, they came here to help us. They're risking their lives to save our people. I think we can trust them." Terran reluctantly opened a channel to the human fleet. Zara took a deep breath and spoke. "Admiral Chen, this is Ambassador Zara Veltan. Thank you for responding to our distress call. How can we assist your rescue operations?" The response came immediately, and Admiral Chen's voice was warm and professional. "Ambassador, it's good to hear from you. We were hoping you were still alive. We need information about Vorac ship layouts and any intel you have on where they might be holding prisoners. We have some structural data from previous encounters. I'm transmitting it now. But Admiral, I have to ask, what are you people? How are you doing this?" There was a pause. Then Admiral Chen's voice came back with what sounded like amusement. "Ambassador, we're humans. We come from a little planet called Earth that most folks haven't heard of. As for how we're doing this, well, we're stubborn, we don't like bullies, and we have a really hard time accepting that something is impossible just because everyone says it is." But your tactics, they don't make any sense according to established military doctrine. Ma'am, with respect, established. Military doctrine has never dealt with humans before. We tend to approach problems differently than most species. As if to prove her point, a new voice broke into the conversation. Admiral, this is Captain Torres. We've secured Bioship 17 and rescued about 300 Aquarian civilians. The bugs weren't expecting us to use their own digestive systems against them. Who knew that feeding them human military rations would cause such spectacular digestive distress? Outstanding, Captain. What's your next target? Bioship 23 looks like it's got a lot of civilians on board. We're going to try the diplomatic approach first. See if we can convince them to surrender by explaining human tax law. If that doesn't work, we'll switch to interpretive dance. Zara looked at Captain Theron, who was staring at the communication console with his mouth open. Did he just say interpretive dance? Theron asked. I think he did, Zara replied. I'm beginning to understand why the galaxy has never heard of humans before. They're completely unpredictable. The battle continued for another hour, but it was no longer really a battle. It had become something more like a rescue operation with occasional explosions. The humans systematically disabled or captured Vorac bioships while rescuing every Kepler Republic citizen they could find. They used tactics that should have been impossible. Boarding ships through waste disposal systems, overloading bio-neural networks with paradoxical logic problems, and in one memorable case, convincing a Vorac commander to surrender by challenging him to a dance-off and then performing something they called the robot until the alien's mental processes crashed from confusion. But perhaps the most remarkable thing was how they treated the civilians they rescued. Each human ship that recovered Kepler Republic citizens immediately provided them with food, medical care, and what appeared to be psychological counseling. The humans seemed genuinely concerned about the welfare of people they had never met and might never see again. Ambassador, came Admiral Chen's voice during a brief lull in the fighting, we've rescued about 12,000 of your people so far. Our medical teams are treating them for trauma and malnutrition. Is there anything specific we should know about Aquarian physiology? Admiral, our people are amphibious. They need access to water for their respiratory systems. And many of them will be suffering from psychological shock. The Vorac's feeding process is traumatic. Understood. We've got portable aquatic environments on all our ships, and our counselors are experienced with trauma recovery. Don't worry, Ambassador. We'll take good care of them. Zara felt tears forming in her eyes. These strange humans had traveled across the galaxy to help people they didn't know, using tactics that defied logic. And now they were providing humanitarian aid with the same casual competence they had shown in battle. Admiral, she said, I need to ask you something. Why did you come here? Why risk your lives for strangers? There was a long pause before Admiral Chen answered. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but firm. Ambassador, we humans have a saying, no one gets left behind. We received your message, and we heard people asking for help. That's all we needed to know. Maybe other species calculate the odds before they act, but humans, well, we tend to act first and worry about the odds later. But you could have been killed. Your entire fleet could have been destroyed. Yes, ma'am, that's true. But if we hadn't tried, we would have had to live with knowing that we let innocent people die when we might have been able to save them. For humans, that's a worse fate than death. As Zara listened to the humans coordinating their rescue operations while simultaneously defeating the most feared military force in the galaxy, she began to understand that these Terrans represented something new in galactic civilization. They were not just another species with advanced technology or superior weapons. They were something far more dangerous to the galaxy's established order, a species that refused to accept that some things were impossible, and that was willing to risk everything to help strangers in need. The Kepler Republic was being saved by monsters who had chosen to be heroes. The queen mind of the Vorac swarm had existed for over 10,000 years. In all that time, across the consumption of more than 1,000 worlds and the absorption of billions of life forms, she had never experienced what lesser species called fear. Fear was an emotion of individual creatures who worried about their own survival. The swarm was eternal, collective, unstoppable, until now. The reports flooding in from General Form Scarex made no sense. A small fleet of unknown vessels had appeared in the Kepler system and was systematically destroying her bioships. Not just defeating them, that had happened before, though rarely. These newcomers were doing something far worse. They were making her forces afraid. Fear was spreading through the swarm's collective consciousness like a virus. Individual warrior forms were beginning to experience doubt. Ship minds were questioning orders. Some of the smaller bioships had actually attempted to retreat rather than engage the enemy. This was impossible. The Vorac did not feel fear. They did not retreat. They consumed everything in their path, or they died trying. That was the way of the swarm, unchanged for millennia. But these humans were changing everything. The Queen Mind turned her vast attention to the tactical data streaming in from the battle. She absorbed the sensor readings, communication intercepts, and combat reports, trying to understand what she was facing. What she found defied every model of warfare in her extensive databases. The humans fought with a combination of advanced technology and primitive brutality that should have been contradictory but somehow worked perfectly together. They used sophisticated weapons and defensive systems, but they also engaged in hand-to-hand combat with her warrior forms using what appeared to be metal clubs and explosive devices. They demonstrated tactical brilliance in their coordinated attacks. But they also made decisions that seemed completely irrational. Multiple human commanders had sacrificed their own ships to damage hers, but instead of dying with their vessels, they had somehow teleported to safety and continued fighting from other ships. Most disturbing of all, they appeared to be enjoying themselves. The Queen Mind had absorbed the memories of countless military commanders from dozens of species. She understood fear, anger, desperation, and even the cold determination of professional soldiers. But she had never encountered warriors who treated battle like entertainment. The human communication intercepts were full of references to fun, excitement, and adrenaline rush. They made jokes while fighting for their lives. They sang songs while their comrades died. They seemed to get more enthusiastic as their situation became more desperate. This was not just unusual military behavior. This was evidence of a fundamental difference in psychology that the Queen Mind could not comprehend. She focused her attention on the human identified as Captain Marcus Torres, who was currently leading a boarding party through Bioship 47. The captain's vital signs showed that he was in extreme physical stress. Heart rate elevated, adrenaline levels dangerously high, multiple minor injuries from combat. Yet his communication transmissions suggested he was having the time of his life. "Yo, Martinez, check this out," Torres was saying as he fired some kind of explosive projectile at a group of warrior forms. "These bugs have like 6 different ways to kill you, but they've never figured out how to handle a good old-fashioned headbutt." The captain then proceeded to attack a warrior form that was 3 times his size by ramming into it with his armored helmet. The impact should have killed him, but his armor's powered systems somehow amplified the blow enough to knock the warrior form unconscious. "Torres, you magnificent crazy person," came another human voice. "Save some for the rest of us." No promises. "Kim, these bugs are therapeutic to punch." The Queen Mind tried to analyze this behavior using every psychological model in her databases. Was Torres suffering from some kind of mental breakdown? Were the humans in a drug-induced state that eliminated their survival instincts? But the more she studied the humans, the more she realized that this was not aberrant behavior for their species. This was normal. They were all like this. Every human in the fleet showed the same pattern. They were competent, professional, and effective warriors who also happened to treat mortal combat as a form of recreation. They coordinated complex tactical maneuvers while making jokes. They risked their lives for strangers while complaining about the quality of the enemy's interior decorating, and they were winning. The tactical situation in the Kepler system was deteriorating rapidly. General Form Scarex had lost over 30 bioships, and the humans were showing no signs of slowing down. Worse, they were adapting to Vorac tactics faster than the swarm could develop new ones. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the human xenobiologist, had somehow figured out how to disrupt Vorac neural networks using sound waves. Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka had convinced several ship minds to surrender by overwhelming them with incomprehensible human cultural concepts. Captain Torres and his Marines were physically beating warrior forms that had been specifically designed to be unbeatable in close combat. But the most terrifying development was what the humans were doing to the captured bioships. Instead of destroying them, the humans were studying them. Dr. Vasquez and her team were dissecting Vorac biotechnology and somehow figuring out how to reverse engineer it in real time. They were taking weapons that had been grown over decades and modifying them in hours. Even worse, they were improving them. Admiral Chen, Dr. Vasquez reported during one of the tactical updates, "I've figured out how to hack into their bio-neural networks. If we can establish a direct connection, I think we can convince some of their ship minds to defect." Explain, Doctor. The Vorac collective consciousness is based on shared memory and experience, but they've never encountered anything like human individuality. If I introduce concepts like personal choice and free will into their network, it might cause some of them to break away from the hive mind. The Queen Mind recoiled in horror. The humans were not just defeating her forces, they were trying to corrupt them. They were attempting to introduce the poison of individual thought into the pure collective consciousness of the swarm. "Admiral, I'm detecting massive psychic trauma in the enemy command structure," reported another human voice. "Whatever Dr. Vasquez is doing, it's working. Multiple bioships are showing signs of neural breakdown." "Outstanding. Doctor, you're cleared to proceed with the conversion protocol. Let's see if we can convince some of these bioships to switch sides." The Queen Mind felt something she had never experienced before: panic. The humans were not just fighting the swarm. They were trying to turn the swarm against itself. They were weaponizing the very concept of free will. She reached out with her vast consciousness and tried to contact General Form Scarex directly. What she found in his mind filled her with dread. Scarex was afraid, not just tactically concerned or strategically worried, but genuinely, primitively afraid. The collective certainty that had sustained him for his entire existence was cracking under the relentless pressure of human unpredictability. "Queen Mind." Scarex's mental voice was strained with something approaching desperation. "I request permission to withdraw. The humans are not following any rational military doctrine. They cannot be predicted or countered using conventional tactics. Explain your failures, General Form." "They do not behave like any species we have encountered. They make decisions based on factors that are not logical. They risk valuable resources for minimal gains. They sacrifice themselves for beings they have never met. And they seem to enjoy fighting against impossible odds." The Queen Mind absorbed Scarex's memories of the battle, experiencing the fight through his senses. What she saw there shook her to her core. The humans did not fight like prey species trying to survive, or even like predators hunting for food. They fought like something far more dangerous. They fought like a species that had evolved to enjoy conflict. Every other species the swarm had encountered fought because they had to. The humans fought because they wanted to. They had received a distress call from strangers and had traveled across the galaxy specifically to engage in a battle they could not win, simply because they thought it was the right thing to do. This was not military strategy. This was ideology. and ideology was something the swarm had never learned to fight. "General form," the Queen Mind commanded. "Initiate full retreat. All bioships are to disengage and return to the core systems, immediately." "Queen Mind, the humans are pursuing us. They are not allowing us to withdraw peacefully." The Queen Mind turned her attention to the sensor readings from the retreating bioships. The humans were indeed following the Vorac forces as they tried to leave the system, but they were not firing on the retreating ships. Instead, they were broadcasting messages. "Attention, Vorac forces." Admiral Chen's voice came over the communication channels. "This is your official notice to get out of Kepler Republic space and never come back. Consider this a permanent restraining order backed up by the Terran Defense Force." "Also," came another voice that the Queen Mind recognized as Captain Torres, "tell your friends that Earth says hello. And if any of you bugs ever want a rematch, you know where to find us. We'll be the ones playing loud music and making things explode." The Queen Mind realized with growing horror that the humans were not trying to destroy the swarm. They were dismissing it. They were treating the most feared military force in the galaxy like a minor nuisance that needed to be shooed away. For the first time in 10,000 years of existence, the Queen Mind of the Vorac swarm made a decision based on fear rather than hunger. She ordered a complete retreat from the sector. The humans had won, and they had done it by being something the galaxy had never seen before, a species that was more dangerous when it was helping others than most species were when they were fighting for their own survival. As her bioships fled toward the edge of the galaxy, the Queen Mind began to understand that the humans represented a threat unlike anything the swarm had ever faced. They were not just another predator species to be consumed or avoided. They were apex predators who had chosen to be protectors, and that made them the most terrifying force in the galaxy. 3 months after the Battle of Kepler Prime, Ambassador Zara Veltan stood in the observation deck of the new Galactic Council space station and watched something unprecedented in the history of galactic civilization. A human fleet was arriving for the emergency session of the Council, and every species representative was either terrified or fascinated. The humans had become the most talked-about topic in the galaxy practically overnight, and the stories about them grew more incredible with each telling. Some said they were ancient warriors who had been hiding in the outer rim, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. Others claimed they were refugees from another galaxy who had fled some unimaginable catastrophe. A few conspiracy theorists insisted they were actually artificial beings, created by some long-dead civilization, as the ultimate weapon. Zara knew the truth was both simpler and more complex than any of the theories. The humans were exactly what they claimed to be: a young species from a small planet that had recently achieved faster-than-light travel and had decided to help when they heard someone calling for aid. That simple truth was what made them so frightening to the established galactic order. "Ambassador," Captain Theron said as he approached her position near the viewing port, "the human delegation is requesting permission to dock. Should I grant it?" "Of course, Captain. They're here at our invitation." "Yes, ma'am, but there are some concerns about security. The Council's security forces have never dealt with humans before. They don't know what to expect." Zara understood his worry. In the 3 months since the rescue, the humans had continued to confound every attempt to understand them. They had established a permanent presence in the Kepler system, helping with reconstruction efforts and providing protection against further Vorac incursions. But they had also begun exploring other parts of the galaxy, and wherever they went, they left confusion in their wake. The Crystalline Collective had tried to establish formal diplomatic relations, and had been bewildered when the humans insisted on conducting negotiations while playing something called poker and drinking a substance called coffee that was apparently mildly toxic to most species. The hegemony of worlds had attempted to recruit human mercenaries for their ongoing border conflicts, and had been politely but firmly refused. The humans had explained that they were not in the business of fighting other people's wars unless those people were being oppressed by bullies. Most disturbing to the galactic establishment, the humans had begun making contact with dozens of minor species that had previously been ignored by the major powers. They seemed particularly interested in civilizations that were being threatened by more powerful neighbors. Several aggressive species that had been expanding their territory through conquest had suddenly found themselves facing human peacekeeping forces who made it clear that expansion would no longer be tolerated. The humans called it leveling the playing field. The galactic powers called it destabilizing. Ambassador, Terran continued, there's something else. The human delegation is being led by Admiral Chen, but she's bringing some of the same people who fought in the battle. Captain Torres, Dr. Vasquez, Lieutenant Tanaka. The Council is concerned about having military personnel in a diplomatic setting. Zara smiled. Captain, I think the Council is about to learn that humans don't really distinguish between military personnel and diplomats, the way other species do. They're all just people doing different jobs. As if to prove her point, the human ships docked with the station using maneuvers that were both precisely controlled and completely unnecessary. They approached in a formation that spelled out, what? Their computers identified as a human greeting, rotated their ships in perfect synchronization while playing music loud enough to be detected by the station's sensors, and managed to dock exactly on time despite their elaborate display. Show-offs, Zara muttered, but she was smiling. 20 minutes later, Admiral Chen led the human delegation into the main council chamber. Zara watched the other representatives' reactions as the humans entered. The Admiral looked exactly like what she was, a professional military officer who was completely comfortable in any situation. She wore a simple uniform that somehow managed to look both formal and practical, and she moved with the easy confidence of someone who had never met a problem she couldn't solve. Behind her came the rest of the delegation, and Zara had to suppress a laugh at the Council's reaction. Captain Torres was wearing what appeared to be the same armor he had used during the boarding actions, but somehow cleaned and polished until it looked ceremonial. Dr. Vasquez carried a briefcase that probably contained enough xenobiological research to revolutionize galactic science. Lieutenant Tanaka was taking notes on a device that looked like it had been built from spare parts, but was probably more advanced than anything in the Council's archives. They looked like what they were, competent, confident people who had important work to do and weren't going to be intimidated by fancy surroundings or formal protocols. Honored representatives, Admiral Chen said as she approached the speaking platform. Thank you for inviting us to address the Council. We're here to discuss our recent actions in the Kepler system and to talk about how humans might fit into the larger galactic community. Council Speaker Vorac, a tall, thin being from the Centauri Federation, activated his translation matrix and spoke in the formal tones that had been used for diplomatic discourse for thousands of years. Admiral Chen, the Council recognizes the effectiveness of human military intervention in the Kepler system. However, we have concerns about the precedent your actions may set. The Vorac swarm has been a threat to galactic civilization for centuries, but it has also served to maintain a certain balance of power. Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, but Zara noticed that Captain Torres shifted slightly behind her. It was a subtle movement, but it reminded everyone in the chamber that these humans were warriors as well as diplomats. Speaker Vorac, Admiral Chen replied, could you explain what you mean by balance of power? Because from where we sit, it looks like that balance consisted of powerful species ignoring genocide as long as it wasn't happening to them. A murmur ran through the chamber. No one spoke to the council speaker like that. Admiral, Vorac continued, his tone becoming frostier, you must understand that galactic civilization is complex. We cannot intervene in every conflict. Resources are limited and military action carries risks. Speaker, Captain Torres interrupted, stepping forward. With respect, that's bullshit. The translation matrices struggled with the human profanity, finally settling on something that conveyed extreme skepticism and disapproval. The chamber fell silent. Admiral Chen didn't reprimand Torres. Instead, she nodded slightly. The captain makes a valid point, if somewhat bluntly. We've reviewed the Council's records for the past century. You have the military capacity to stop the Vorac. You have the technology to protect vulnerable species. You choose not to because it's inconvenient. The humans do not understand, Vorac began. Oh, we understand perfectly, Dr. Vasquez said, consulting her briefcase. I've analyzed the political structure of the Council and the economic relationships between member species. The current system benefits the powerful at the expense of the weak. The Vorac serve as a convenient excuse for not helping smaller civilizations because resources must be conserved for the greater threat. She looked up from her notes and smiled pleasantly. It's actually a very elegant system for maintaining the status quo. Morally reprehensible but elegant. Zara watched Speaker Varex's reaction with interest. The Council was used to diplomatic language that concealed true meanings behind layers of polite fiction. The humans were being direct to the point of rudeness, and it was clearly disturbing the established order. The humans seem to believe that military force can solve all problems, Vorac said stiffly. This is a naive perspective that fails to account for the complexities of galactic politics. Lieutenant Tanaka stepped forward and activated a holographic display. Actually, Speaker, we've done extensive analysis of galactic conflicts over the past 500 years. In 67% of cases where the Council chose not to intervene, the conflicts could have been resolved with minimal military action if intervention had occurred early. Instead, the Council waited until situations became intractable, then used the complexity as justification for continued inaction. The hologram showed a detailed breakdown of conflicts, casualties, and potential intervention points. It was the kind of comprehensive analysis that the Council's own strategists would have taken years to produce, but the humans had apparently completed it in 3 months. Furthermore, Tanaka continued, our analysis suggests that the primary function of the current Council system is not to maintain peace, but to preserve the existing power structure. The major species use the Council to legitimize their dominance, while avoiding responsibility for protecting smaller civilizations. The chamber erupted in angry voices as representatives from the major powers objected to the humans' assessment. But Zara noticed that none of them actually disputed the facts Tanaka had presented. Admiral Chen waited for the noise to die down before speaking again. Honored representatives, we're not here to criticize your past decisions. We're here to offer an alternative. She gestured to her team, and they activated a larger holographic display that showed a map of the galaxy. Dozens of star systems were highlighted in different colors. These are the civilizations that have contacted us since the Battle of Kepler Prime, Admiral Chen explained. Species that are being threatened by aggressive neighbors, worlds that are being exploited by more powerful civilizations, colonies that have been abandoned by the major powers because they're not economically viable. She paused and looked directly at Speaker Vorac. We've received over 300 requests for assistance. Some want protection, some want mediation, some just want someone to witness what's being done to them so that their deaths won't go unnoticed. What are you proposing? Vorac asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. We're proposing to help them, Admiral Chen said simply. All of them. The humans are establishing a new organization called the Terran Assistance Corps. Our mission is simple. When someone asks for help, we provide it. When someone is being oppressed, we stop the oppression. When someone is threatened by bullies, we deal with the bullies. The chamber fell silent again, but this time, the silence was different. It was the silence of people trying to process something that fundamentally challenged their worldview. Admiral, Speaker Vorac said carefully, such an organization would require enormous resources. It would need to maintain fleets across the galaxy, provide humanitarian aid to countless worlds, and intervene in potentially hundreds of conflicts. No single species could sustain such an effort. Admiral Chen smiled, and for the first time since entering the chamber, she looked genuinely pleased. Speaker, you're absolutely right. No single species could sustain such an effort. She activated another display, and this time the hologram showed dozens of species insignias that Zara didn't recognize. That's why we're not doing it alone, Admiral Chen continued. These are the civilizations that have already joined the Terran Assistance Corps. Some of them contribute ships, some provide supplies, some offer specialized knowledge or technology. But they all share a common belief, that the strong have a responsibility to protect the weak, and that no one should suffer alone when help is available. Zara felt her hearts skip a beat as she realized what the humans had done. They hadn't just rescued the Kepler Republic. They had used the rescue as a proof of concept for something much larger. They were building a new kind of galactic civilization. The Council is welcome to join us, Admiral Chen said, addressing the chamber as a whole. We could use your experience and resources. But with or without the Council's approval, the Terran Assistance Corps is going to help anyone who asks for it? And if the Council objects to your interference in galactic affairs? Vorac asked. Captain Torres stepped forward again, and this time his smile was not entirely friendly. Speaker, with all due respect, the Council has had thousands of years to solve these problems and has chosen not to. We're not asking for permission to do what's right. We're offering you a chance to be part of the solution. He paused and looked around the chamber. But if you want to stand in our way while people are dying, well, we've dealt with bullies before. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. The humans were not seeking the Council's approval. They were informing the Council of their intentions and offering partnership. But if the Council chose to oppose them, the humans were prepared for that as well. Speaker Vorac looked around the chamber at his fellow representatives, reading the mood of the Council. Zara could see the calculation in his eyes. The humans had already proven they could defeat the Vorac. They had the support of dozens of smaller civilizations. They had resources and technology that were still poorly understood. Most importantly, they had something that the galactic powers had lost long ago: the willingness to act on their principles regardless of the consequences. The Council will consider your proposal, Vorac said finally. We will need time to study the implications and consult with our member governments. Of course, Admiral Chen replied graciously. Take all the time you need, but while you're considering, people are still dying, so we're going to keep helping them. She turned to leave, then paused and looked back at the Council one final time. Oh, and Speaker? The next time someone sends out a distress call, you might want to answer it. Because if you don't, we will. And we're a lot less concerned about galactic politics than you are. As the human delegation left the chamber, Zara realized that she had just witnessed a turning point in galactic history. The humans had not come to join the existing order. They had come to replace it with something better. And judging by the expressions on the other representatives' faces, they were going to succeed. The galaxy's most feared species had become its most effective protectors, and nothing would ever be the same.